What's up guys, Derek, moreplaysmartace.com. Today we're going to be talking about Brian Bander. So I'm sure you probably never heard Brian Bander before. The reason I'm bringing him up is he's somebody I knew not personally, but by extension through very close friends of mine. And he was part of a online community I was a part of before that was, well, I'm still technically a part of actually, that is focused on self-improvement and, just all aspects of improving one's own life. And unfortunately, he passed away last year in January 14th, 2019. And the unfortunate part of it is that it was suicide. And the reason it was suicide was reportedly by him, heavy metal toxicity, specifically mercury, that had accumulated in his brain and had given him self-induced autism. So this is something that's a bit of a touchy subject, and I want to put a disclaimer on this video. I already have a sufficient medical disclaimer, but I know YouTube's pretty touchy about subjects like this. This does not represent my personal opinion, nor am I saying that his statements that I'm about to outline are factual or represent the truth or whatever. I'm just going to be reading off of his own site, word for word. None of my own personal opinions will be injected into this. Brian Bander actually left a assortment of blog entries that basically detailed from start to finish exactly what happened to him, his process of attempting heavy metal chelation, his process of becoming more and more poisoned essentially, and eventually the culmination of everything where he took his own life because he couldn't deal with the effects that the mercury was having in his body anymore. And at the very end of it, the only reason I'm saying all this is, first of all, I've had my own issues, not necessarily issues, but my own experience with exploring heavy metal toxicity over the past year as I've started to delve into my own genome. So as you've probably seen through some of my other videos, I've talked about MTHFR polymorphisms, the effect it has on impairing methylation, a lot of different things that come as a consequence of having lifestyle practices that also essentially exacerbate existing genetic conditions, not necessarily condition, but polymorphisms that then influence your body's ability to perform physiologic functions that would otherwise be fine for a healthy person. So I'm sure you've probably seen all the cases of, most people are fine from vaccines, or most people are fine when they do this or that. And then for some reason, there's always those token individuals who seem to have massive problems, and the people swear, the parents swear that it's something, and then everyone calls them crazy. And I just think the implications coming from something like this imply that there's more research to be done. And I just want to read word for word what he said, and you can take from that what you will. None of my own opinions will be in here. He literally said at the end in his last release of rights, please share my story and feel free to use it in any way you wish. The odd thing is this domain was pre-purchased for 9 years, but apparently EasyWP, which is linked to his Namecheap account, doesn't offer prepayments and only offers 1-year auto renewal. So the site no longer is accessible even after it's only been a year and a few months. And I tried to go find the posts a few months ago, and it was already before the 1-year mark. The thing had already been taken down. I'm assuming it had something to do with his hosting and it wasn't manually taken down. But with that being said, I wasn't able to retrieve some of the images he uploaded because I was using a site that retrieves like old cached versions of pages where you can't actually download images, you can just get the text from them. But I'm going to be reading word for word off that. If you want to cross-reference it yourself by going to look at his site, you can do that. The site is brianbander.com, BrianBander.com. So basically I got the archive of it, and I'm going to be starting in his table of contents here. 1 is goodbye, 2 Thailand, 3 answers, 4 mercury poisoning, 5 chelation, 6 health history, 7 putting it all together, 8 doubters, 9 aftermath. Good parts of my life, things I enjoyed, smile, joy, pictures, release of rights. So we're going to be starting from the beginning. This is literally going to be me reading off of it. So if you don't want to listen in slow me talking speed, turn it up to 1.75 times speed or whatever you want to do. Just know this, might be boring, but it might be important too. So part 1, goodbye. I didn't want to have to do this. Unfortunately, I've been effectively disabled by chronic mercury poisoning. It's been a year and a half of an endless nightmare. My digestive system is messed up. I have food sensitivity, EMF sensitivity, my joints and muscles ache constantly, my body twitches and I can't sleep. I have tinnitus, headaches, insane itchy skin rashes, my vision is extremely light sensitive, blurry, and doesn't feel like I'm in my own body. And worst of all, my brain function is severely diminished. I can't focus on anything. My short-term memory is completely shot and I can't make a decision to save my life. The best way to describe this is that I've been stuck in a bad trip and it keeps getting worse. If there was any hope in reversing this, I would never have considered such a drastic measure, but alas, there is no relief and I can't live another day like this. How did this happen? A lot of factors contributed and I will share the whole story. Please use the link at the bottom of each page or the sidebar to navigate to the different chapters. Just be sure to read through in order. It took me a long time to piece everything together, but I'm glad I was finally able to figure it out. I always knew something was wrong with me. However, I always thought that it was somehow my fault. I now have peace knowing that I just got dealt a shit hand and that I'm not to blame. He then has some, goodbyes to people that are special in his life that it would be, I feel like, odd if I was to, recite them to you guys. However, he did say one thing to his mom and dad that I feel is worth touching on. He said, "Please make my life mean something by following up with my Mercury research requests. Thank you for all your efforts and support. Thank you for everyone else who had a positive impact on my life. Even though I've always struggled, there were a lot of good times along the way. I appreciate you all and hope you have amazing lives. Love, Brian." Thailand, let's rewind to November 2016 when I first arrived in Chiang Mai, Thailand. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but whatever. I was loving the city and my new life as I had wanted to get out of the US for a while. It was great meeting a lot of great people and having an amazing time. Then my online business started doing really well. I was making a lot of money in a short amount of time. Unfortunately, this gave me an ego, something that I've never experienced before. I started getting careless and ended up crashing my motorbike on Songkran. This is the start of my downfall and I couldn't walk for a few weeks. During this time, I ended up getting a UTI, or so I thought, and was peeing about 20 times a day. I was prescribed antibiotics, but the problem didn't go away, and in fact, it got worse. The doctors had no idea, and they just kept giving me different antibiotics. The last antibiotic they gave me was Bactrim, a sulfa compound, in July 2017. 5 minutes after taking it, I thought I was going to die. It was a horrific reaction that lasted about 3 days, but it wasn't over. I was left with blurry vision, derealization, and the previous frequent urination problem. At that point, I knew I was fucked. I've always been afraid of permanent side effects, and my worst fear came true. The next few months, I took the medical research into my own hands and I took a trip to the Philippines to see a specialist who diagnosed my urination problem as candida. I didn't know that guys could get yeast infections, and the problem cleared up quickly with some fluconazole, but I was still left with the lasting side effects from the Bactrim. Many people online reported having a bad reaction, but I couldn't find any stories of lasting side effects after stopping the drug. The lack of a solution left me very depressed, as I just wanted to be healthy again and have my life back. Towards the end of 2017 and early 2018, I started developing more symptoms: food sensitivity, light sensitivity, skin rashes, tinnitus. Then the brain symptoms began. I couldn't trust my thoughts anymore. It was like I had no control over my mind, and I kept changing decisions every 30 minutes. I was so over it. I kept telling myself that this couldn't possibly get any worse, and it always did. Chapter 3, Answers. In June 2018, I decided I needed to go back to the US, thinking maybe the change of scenery would help me figure this out. Even after getting nowhere with doctors in the past, I was desperate and began seeking every kind of specialist. No help. I ordered every kind of herbal supplement known to man. Nothing. After a couple months of intense research, I found an interesting connection to my candida, my previous issue. Heavy metal poisoning, specifically mercury. I had never even heard of it before and initially brushed it off due to people reporting it took them years to get better by taking a special compound every 3 hours around the clock. I couldn't wait years. I needed relief now. I was looking for anything else to be the problem so that I could solve it instantly. Then one night I had a turmeric drink and had a very strange reaction to it. My head became cold and felt like I had a clamp around it. This lasted a few days. What the fuck? Isn't turmeric supposed to be the miracle supplement? Then I remembered an article I read from the Mercury group. It listed foods and supplements to avoid, and one of the big ones was turmeric, due to it raising thiol sulfur levels. I immediately went back to the page and read everything there was to know about mercury. Fortunately, after a year and a half of searching, I finally found my answer. Unfortunately, I would rather have any other disease than this. Chapter 4, Mercury poisoning. I am going to explain this in layman's terms, but for more scientific answers, please visit Andy Cutler Chilation. He's the only person that has put any type of real research into the dangers of mercury and how to get it out of the body. And he linked the oral chelation for mercury, the Andy Cutler protocol under that. To start things off, we need to go over how mercury gets inside you to begin with. There are 5 major ways mercury gets into your body. 1, vaccine/medical treatments. 2, dental amalgams. 3, air from industrial facilities. 4, water and fish. 5, consumer products. He then lists the link to epa.gov/mercury/mercury consumer products. Once mercury gets inside your body, it will either be detoxed naturally or it will be stored in your organs and fat tissues for those with certain gene mutations. If you have those mutations, the mercury will be stored in your tissues indefinitely. This leads to many strange symptoms as the mercury builds up over time. And then he linked a Medical News Today article, and some of those mutations are actually very common. They're MTHFR polymorphisms and assortment of other things, but the main thing is being homozygous C67T for MTHFR, which is something I've described many times that I also have, and why I have many supplementation and diet practices revolved around kind of tailored towards that to support the methylation pathway. But anyways, the only way to remove stored mercury is by using chelation agents, which have 2 sulfur compounds that bind to it. This includes DMSA, DMPS, and ALA. The problem here is that they don't hold their bond permanently and can redistribute the mercury to other areas of the body. The safest approach developed thus far is to take extremely low oral doses according to their half-life, so that mercury can be pulled out from the tissues and excreted without too much redistribution. But even when you take the chelation agents this way, there are a lot of negative symptoms that arise when moving mercury around, especially with ALA, as it can cross the blood-brain barrier. Mercury in the brain is the big problem, and all my symptoms, derealization, blurry vision, impaired thinking, light sensitivity, fatigue, sleep issues, tinnitus, etc., matched up perfectly to mercury poisoning. After I had all this knowledge, I got an HTMA hair test, which is basically just they check the mineral analysis, or if there's heavy metals essentially built up in your hair. They can check with some level of more reasonable accuracy than standard tests how toxic your hair is essentially, and it's like a proxy for how much metals are stored in your body essentially. But anyways, it's the only accurate way to measure heavy metal accumulation in the body, and ordered the chelation agents. I was confident that I finally figured out what was wrong with me, and this was convincingly confirmed with my test results, which you can view below. And unfortunately, I don't have the documents or the images to show because this site is only accessible through archives now. So it would be nice if it was restored, but I don't blame whoever has management over this for not restoring it if they chose not to. I also plugged in my ancestry DNA data that I got from Living DNA into Genetic Genie to view my genetic mutations. The yellow colors are heterozygous mutations and the red is homozygous. The yellow mutations are pretty much just as bad as the red, and many of the mutations I have severely impact the detox pathways. He then links a link to amymyersmd.com in a post she made in 2017, in what appears to be July of 2017, of an article called "What is an MTHFR mutation and what to do about it?" And if you've seen some of my older videos, specifically regarding, creatine supplementation, alpha GPC, betaine, methyl donors, methylation pathway, that kind of stuff, then you'll know, I've talked about this fairly in depth in the past because it's directly relevant to my own details. I had the exact same polymorphisms he had. Hair test results, Genetic Genie, gene mutations, and Living DNA raw data. I don't have the images to show, unfortunately, for the reasons I outlined. Let's go into chapter 5, chelation. After a year and a half of worsening symptoms and no answers, I was thrilled to finally have a diagnosis. I thought that figuring out that I have mercury poisoning would be the end of my struggles. I didn't realize how hard it was to actually go about chelation, and I didn't think I would react so badly to it. I went full speed ahead and moved way too fast, even after knowing that chelation is a long-term process. I wasn't thinking clearly, and I just wanted this stuff out of my body and brain. For a primer on the protocol, read this guy's account of chelation as he explains it very well. Then he links to stratosphere.com/experience-life post in 2014, April 2014, called Toxic Mercury Chelation Removal. Anyway, the first thing I did was get ALA from the vitamin store. The lowest dose sold, however, was 100 milligrams. The recommended starting dose is 12.5 milligrams to 25 milligrams. So I split the tablets in 4 and I started my first round. After the first few doses, I felt the same cold and clamp-like feeling around my head like I did from turmeric. I couldn't sleep at all. I was in full-blown zombie mode and my thinking was even more impaired than it was beforehand. I knew I needed a lower milligram amount, so I had the genius idea to blend all the ALA tablets I had so I could better control the dosages. When I opened the blender, I inhaled about 20,000 milligrams of ALA. Fucking hell. The next few days were some of the worst imaginable. The pressure in my head was unreal and I became extremely sensitive to EMF. I couldn't even go in a room with an electronic device without intense head pain, sickness, and confusion. I could also barely move. I was slurring my words and my emotions were completely night and day. It was a true Mad Hatter scenario and I felt autistic. It took about a month for these new symptoms to lessen, but then eating any kind of high sulfur food would cause these symptoms to return. Cilantro fucked me up quite a few times as my blood-brain barrier became very weak. My thinking ability and blurry vision / derealization also permanently worsened. After that, I got microdoses of ALA and DMSA online, but at this point I was way too sensitive to them. I continued failing rounds and got worse each time from the redistribution to the brain. My chelation mishaps have made me 1,000 times worse than I was originally, and if I knew how much worse it could have got, I would have probably been able to live the rest of my life only partially disabled from the initial redistribution from the Bactrim, which I explain further here. And then he links to Putting It All Together Part 7, which is something we're going to get to soon, but we're not there yet. But at this point, it's just all too much. I now know how dangerous moving mercury around is, and the worst part is, it won't kill you. It will just render you completely disabled and unable to function. My life right now is not worth living in the slightest, and with no alternative solution to miraculously removing the mercury from my body and brain, I am choosing to end it without any more suffering. Chelation has helped many people remove mercury and get their lives back, but it doesn't work for everyone. Here are some positive chelation experiences, and you can find many more in the very active Facebook group with more than 50,000 members. And he links to cutlersuccessstories.weebly.com/adult-stories.html. In terms of chelation working out or not, it depends a lot on your gene mutations and also massively on how much mercury is already inside your brain and the state of your body when you start chelation. Unfortunately, I was already way too messed up for this to ever work. Here's a really good article that explains why chelation can sometimes have an adverse effect. Then he links to Dr. News, drknews.com/chelation-autoimmunity. Part 6, Health History. In order to understand how mercury has affected me to this day, it's important to understand my health history. Throughout my life, I've always had sleep issues, been extremely fatigued, had anxiety, OCD, ADD, as well as on-off bouts of depression. In addition, I've always had a bunch of other weird health issues like teeth grinding, cold hands and feet, arms and legs falling asleep easily, not being able to sweat, arthritis, and back and hip pain. As I got older, these things got worse, especially my sleeping and energy levels. I needed 10 hours of sleep to even function, and I would still be dead tired all day until nighttime. This would cause me to fall asleep later and later every night until I was waking up at 4 p.m. and falling asleep at 8 a.m. Then it would take me weeks trying to reset my sleep schedule by taking Ambien or staying up as late as I could with coffee to try and go around the clock. When I eventually would get it reset to a normal schedule, it would only take one nap or one night past 10 p.m. to start the vicious cycle all over again. It was fucking awful and I could never have a stable life. In high school and college, when I had to get up at a certain time, I wouldn't be able to stay awake and even brought a pillow to class. In regards to my anxiety and depression, I made huge progress during an intense period of self-improvement in 2013 to 2014. I completely obliterated my social anxiety and my depression lifted when I started setting goals and achieving them. However, there was a very noticeable cap on this improvement. My energy levels were still stuck on zero no matter what I did for myself in regards to socializing, sleep, exercise, or diet. And my arthritis and muscle soreness had gotten significantly worse over the years. At first, it was just one small spot in my lower back, but now has extended to my hips, wrists, elbows, knees, neck, and shoulders. It became very hard for me to be physically active, and laying down was the only real comfortable position for me. Working in bed from my laptop was all I could really manage. Life in total had always been extremely difficult for me, and my strange health issues kept getting worse every year that passed. I knew that there was always something wrong with me, no matter how many times doctors told me otherwise. I used to think it was just my genetics, which is partially true, because I just couldn't fix my health issues no matter what I tried. It also didn't help that no one ever believed me, and I was just thought of as lazy. Chapter 7, Putting It All Together. As it turns out, besides causing all my current symptoms, mercury also causes my previous health issues. The difference of intensity comes from where the mercury is in the body and brain and how much has accumulated over time. The question then, of course, is how did mercury originally get inside of me? Most people who have mercury poisoning get it from silver amalgams, which are actually 50% mercury. So you put silver in quotation marks because they're not pure silver, they're 50% mercury. Thankfully, I never got those. But where is almost everyone getting mercury? Vaccines and flu shots. Until 2003, all vaccines contained thimerosal, which is ethyl mercury used as a preservative. Many vaccines still contain thimerosal today, and all flu shots still contain it. Needless to say, I received the full vaccine schedule as I was born in 1993, plus a lot of duplicates for schools, camps, etc. I also received numerous flu shots as expected. Now, the CDC and FDA claim that ethyl mercury is safe to take in small amounts because the body can detox it, unlike methyl mercury, which they consider toxic because it can't easily be detoxed. And then he links to the cdc.gov site for vaccine safety concerns and thimerosal. They're right in a sense, as most people can detox ethyl mercury and won't have any problems because of it. But not everyone can detox it due to certain gene mutations, and it's just as toxic as methyl mercury if it stays in the body and gets stored in your tissues. They also admit that ethyl mercury is toxic in larger amounts, yet they're still injecting it. In addition, after many adverse vaccine reactions had occurred in the late 1980s, Congress passed a law that blocks any lawsuits against vaccine companies. There's a bunch of important research and evidence to this shown in the documentary Trace Amounts, and then he links traceamounts.com. The lack of my being able to detox mercury is what ultimately allowed it to accumulate in my body throughout my entire life. This also strongly correlates to my sleep and energy problems worsening over time, as well as my arthritis and back pain. And Bactrim, which I took in July 2017, is a 1-thiol sulfur compound which can also cross the blood-brain barrier. When I took this drug, it binded to the mercury in my body and redistributed it, some of it, into my brain. It's really true that once you mess with the brain, you're never the same. After that day, I became a zombie and have been getting significantly worse ever since. The ALA blender incident that I described in the chelation chapter also redistributed a huge amount of mercury from my body to my brain. Now it literally feels like I have autism and has made this whole situation unbearable. In addition, my blood-brain barrier is so damaged that instead of just high thiol foods and substances giving me symptoms, any food or substance that can cross the blood-brain barrier will now do so. I can't even relieve my bodily symptoms without other brain symptoms worsening. From my unfortunate personal experience with this, I'm confident in saying that autism in reality is actually just mercury poisoning. The severity of autism just depends on your gene mutations and how much mercury gets past the blood-brain barrier and stores in your brain. Vaxxed has a lot of great research and evidence to check out as well, as it focuses more on the rise of autism. He then links vaxthemovie.com. The Truth About Vaccines is also a very good documentary to watch on YouTube. Chapter 8, Doubters. Now, I know the stance on vaccines is seen as an unpopular opinion and I will be labeled as a conspiracy theorist, but facts are facts. If I haven't been through this tumultuous episode in my life as a whole, I wouldn't believe it either. And I'm not saying that this is common, my case is definitely a rarity. But just because it's rare doesn't mean it should be ignored. Potentially millions of people around the world should not be ignored. The worst part about this is that chronic mercury poisoning won't kill you. It will just disable you, and no one will believe you. There's no support and no efficient way of removing it from the body and brain. It'd be a lot easier to say that I've just had a hard life and I'm depressed and crazy. While yes, all of that is somewhat true, the real underlying cause is mercury. Unfortunately, the mainstream media and healthcare industry are going to put me on blast and spin this story and deny the fact that they could be held partially responsible for my outcome like they do with thousands of other cases that get swept under the rug. Don't let them execute another cover-up. Share this story. Let's get to the bottom of mercury and save people's lives from suffering the same fate I have. However, it's important to note that I don't fully blame vaccines for the mercury accumulation in my body. There are many more factors at play, including fish and the water supply, air pollution, and other medical and consumer products. Some could claim that Thailand was the sole cause of my mercury exposure. The air and water quality are of a very low standard, and I have no doubt that I accumulated more mercury during my time there. But it wasn't just Thailand. It was an accumulation throughout my whole life, and my previous worsening health issues, and the permanent adverse reaction to the Bactrim and ALA reflect that. I'm sure some will also question how I was able to write this if I am so messed up. The answer is that it took me an extremely long time and I had to take frequent breaks due to my vast array of symptoms. On the other hand, I've always been a pretty decent writer, so I'm glad I was able to type this whole story before I was incapable of doing so. Also, I fully understand that I don't have all the answers, which is why I would love for more research and awareness to be made about chronic mercury poisoning and why I am volunteering my body and brain to be completely examined, which I talk about more in the next chapter. Chapter 9, Aftermath. I suppose a funeral can be held if my parents want, though I don't really know how I feel about the idea. Afterwards, please use my body for further testing to understand how mercury damages the body and brain, and not just some bullshit blood test. Go deep into my tissues, stomach, organs, and brain. I'd like multiple private labs to do this. I don't want any government bureaucracy covering up the results. Mom and Dad, please make this happen. Please make my life mean something. Hundreds of thousands of people are suffering from chronic mercury poisoning, and probably about 10 times more who don't realize yet that mercury is a problem. I would like for awareness to be made so that these people can be helped and a more effective way of removing mercury can be developed. And of course, I would like all forms of mercury to be completely banned from our society so that no one else will ever have to live their lives ruined by this toxic metal. This especially includes vaccines, flu shots, dentistry, and other medical treatments. Also, I heard Johnny Depp is going to be starring in a movie about the Minamata mercury poisoning later next year. Hopefully that can raise some awareness as well. After you have the data from my examination, please cremate me and bring me to Chiang Mai. Give me to Bua if she wants me. If not, bring me to Wat Doi Suthep. Sorry if I'm butchering these pronunciations. I refuse to be buried and I refuse to be kept in the United States. Chapter 11, Chapter 12, and Chapter 13 are things that are kind of personal though, so I felt that it would not be my place to go over some of that stuff. So Chapter 11 was things I liked. Chapter 12, Smile Joy. Chapter 13, Pictures, which unfortunately I couldn't even retrieve those. So those I feel like, should be reserved for people who are close to him that actually, I shouldn't be reading that stuff on his behalf, I feel like. But anyways, Chapter 14, Release of Rights. I, Brian Bander, being the creator and owner of all information on the site brianbander.com, neither hold nor retain any claim or copyright on any part of this website. I do not grant these rights to any individual person or entity either in life or upon death. Rather, I release all rights to this work, making it public domain. Please share my story and feel free to use it in any way you wish. In addition, this domain has been pre-purchased for 9 years through Namecheap with WordPress hosting through EasyWP, linked to my Namecheap account. Unfortunately, EasyWP doesn't offer prepayments and only offers 1-year auto renewals. I give permission to my dad, Jeffrey Bender, to have access to my Bank of America and Namecheap account so that payments will continue to be made and brianbanner.com will continue to stay live on the internet indefinitely. Furthermore, anyone is welcome to make backups in case there's a problem with my hosting package. Brian Bander, January 14th, 2019. And in his obituary on legacy.com/obituaries/name/Brian-Bander/obituary, you can see Brian Bander passed away unexpectedly on January 14, 2019 in Delray Beach, Florida. He was 25 years old and lived in Glastonbury and Coventry, CT. Brian was the beloved son of Jeffrey Bander and Karen Buckman and stepson of Ron Buckman. In addition to his parents, he was loved and is survived by his brothers Jason and Brian Buckman, grandparents Art and Gail Siegel and Sylvia Bander, as well as many relatives and friends. Brian attended grade school in Thailand and graduated from Glastonbury High School in 2011. He attended the University of Hartford, Manchester Community College, and the University of South Florida. Brian was an entrepreneur who developed multiple successful e-commerce businesses while living in CT and in Chiang Mai, Thailand. He was a personal growth, online gaming, mountain biking, drumming, Magic the Gathering, and ping pong enthusiast who wasn't afraid to take risks and live life to the fullest. Brian's family has no words to express their sadness and grief, but Brian left many at brianbander.com a memorial service to celebrate Brian's life and will be held on Sunday, January 27th at 12:30 p.m. at Beth El Temple, 2626 Albany Avenue, West Hartford. The family will receive relatives and friends, and there's some details about his memorial service there. And yeah, so anyways, it's a pretty rough story, and it really hit home for me because it's somebody I knew personally through some of my close friends, and I've actually talked to a few times online. One of the reasons this hit so hard too is because this is something that I've been researching for a while now, not really the vaccines and whatnot, but more so just heavy metal toxicity in general and how certain gene mutations affect your ability to process them and excrete them out of the body and whatnot. That is something I was researching over the past year. And when I first heard about his story, I didn't even realize how much they intersected with each other. And some of the stuff I was researching was directly what was causing his issues. So from what I read at the time, which when I had full access to the documents and the pictures and everything, I didn't save those because at the time I wasn't even interested in genetics. It only became, maybe a few months after that where I started to really delve deep into, my genome myself, looking at polymorphisms, how it affects, health outcomes and whatnot, and genetic susceptibility to certain things. And one of the main things he's referring to that I do remember is the MTHFR polymorphisms, which he had pretty much the worst ones, which affects it's like 90% of your methylation is like impaired from this gene mutation. And it's actually pretty common, especially among Italians. So it's definitely worth checking out. And, there's lifestyle changes that can be made to support the methylation pathway and hopefully avoid a buildup of toxic metals. But anyways, I don't want to inject my own personal opinion too much into this, or at all really. I'm just, having a general stance on the overarching topic and outlining why it was something I felt to bring to the surface as well. One of the things he did say very explicitly is that he wanted his story to be shared. And not only is this something that I feel like may be beneficial for many people who want to understand managing their health better, but in general, just, his story should be put on a platform that was bigger than the Google algorithm that would have, buried his site. So hopefully more people are able to see it, that this could actually, benefit in some capacity. And you can take from the story what you will. I just wanted to present it in a, unbiased way and kind of, bring it to the surface sort of thing. And YouTube hopefully doesn't censor it. This should be viewed as no differently than me interviewing somebody. I'm simply reading his own words off of a piece of paper. This is not me saying his opinions are correct, nor is it saying my own personal opinions on the matter, nor am I implying anything or giving any medical recommendations or anything. So anyways, take from that what you will. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If Brian Bander's parents end up seeing this, I would compel you to please restore the site as well as all of the information about the genetic results, because that would be it would elucidate a lot of things for a lot of people, I bet. So thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.